Hello everyone, welcome to the TCSC channel. If you like to listen to crime and mystery stories, this TCSC channel can be your choice. A channel that tells crime stories in cities across the country. Hopefully the crime stories told in this channel can increase our vigilance in our lives. If you like the content on this channel, don't forget to make comments and press the subscribe and like button. Anto Pamuji is a 38-year-old man who lives in a simple rented house on Gunung Pegat Street, RT35, Malay Village, Tenggarong Sub-District, Kutai Kertanegara Regency, East Kalimantan Province. Anto lives with his 33-year-old wife, Eka. Eka is a housewife, while Anto, the husband, is a clothes trader in the West Kutai area. Anto is responsible enough as a husband to provide for his family, especially his wife, Eka. He works hard to sell clothes to fulfill the daily needs of his family, as well as Eka, his wife. Anto is even willing to rarely go home and be away from his wife to make a living for his family. While trading outside the city, Anto usually stays in West Kutai for 5 to 6 days to do business. After the clothes are sold out, Anto will return to Tenggarong for 2 days to spend time with his wife and also pick up the merchandise. So in a week, Anto returns home for a maximum of 2 days. The rest of the time, he only communicates with his wife by cell phone. When Anto returns home, he will usually hand over his earnings to Eka, his wife, as his responsibility as a husband. He provides for his wife well, and Anto has full trust in his wife, Eka. He believes Eka will always be good while he is left behind to do business outside the area. Initially, every time Anto came home after trading from out of town, everything was normal. Although they are far away from each other, it is very rare to hear of any problems in their household. But over time, Anto began to notice that there was a strange behavior from his wife, Eka, when he came home from work. Over the past 2 months, Eka's attitude began to change, and Anto felt that his wife was hiding something. As a husband, Anto can certainly feel the change in attitude from his wife, who sometimes seems ignorant, which makes Anto even more uneasy. However, when he asked Eka about the change in her attitude, Eka covered up and said that it was just Anto's feelings. Eka even assured that everything was fine and nothing strange and changed from her as a wife. Eka also said that this might be because Anto was tired and was worrying about far-fetched things. Even though Eka, the wife, tried to reassure Anto, Anto's little heart was still not calm and his mind was drifting. He even began to have suspicions that his wife Eka was having an affair with another man while he was out of town on business. At first, Anto tried to fight his suspicions. He tried to think positively for his wife's loyalty and focus on work. However, over time, Eka's behavior became increasingly strange and suspicious, where 1 week earlier, Eka did not allow Anto to hold her cell phone, even though all this time, when Anto returned home, he was always free to hold his wife's cell phone, and his wife had no objections and problems whatsoever. But how come during this week, Eka forbade Anto to hold his cell phone or even check his cell phone? Therefore, Anto increasingly suspected that his wife had cheated on him behind his back. Anto thought that if his wife was faithful, why didn't she allow him to hold or look at her cell phone? Even Eka often hid her cell phone when her husband came home. Finally, Anto and Eka began to quarrel frequently because of this. It was not uncommon for neighbors to hear the arguments between them. Anto was suspicious of his wife and even openly accused her of having an affair and often communicating with her mistress via cell phone. However, Eka still denied her husband's accusations, even though Eka herself could not give a clear reason why her husband was not allowed to touch her cell phone at all. Finally, Anto's suspicions and arguments with his wife culminated at the end of the year on Friday, December 31st, 2021. That day, Anto, who returned home after trading clothes at a market, again asked Eka to give him her cell phone, but as usual, Eka refused, and this time, unlike usual, Anto did not force Eka. He was rather calm because in his mind at that time, if Eka did not want to admit to having an affair, then he himself would prove his wife's infidelity. Anto immediately set a strategy to prove his suspicion of his wife. Then when Ika went to take a shower, somehow she just put her cell phone down, and at that time Ika's cell phone suddenly rang as a sign of an incoming chat message. Because there was an opportunity, Anto immediately took his wife's cell phone and he saw a chat from a man. Anto immediately opened the chat, and how surprised Anto was when he saw the content of the chat, which was so intimate between Ika, his wife, and a man who was unfamiliar to him. Many intimate words between his wife and the man. Even worse, in the chat, Ika, Anto's wife, said she wanted to get pregnant from the man's seed. Seeing this fact, Anto immediately became angry. It turned out that Anto's suspicions over the past 2 months had been proven, and it turns out that his wife's affair is a man named Cartolo, who is none other than Ika's own cousin. Anto and Cartolo, of course, know each other, and Anto did not expect Ika, his wife, to have an affair with Cartolo, who turned out to be Ika's cousin. Although Anto has received strong evidence of his wife's affair, namely his wife's intimate message conversations with Cartolo through his wife's cell phone, Anto wants even more, namely to catch Ika and Cartolo's affair directly. Anto thought of a strategy on how he could make that happen. Anto soon got a brilliant idea. When Ika finished bathing, even though he was still overwhelmed with emotion, Anto calmly told his wife that to get more profit, tomorrow he would go out of town to sell the remaining stock of clothes. At that time, Ika did not feel strange because her husband had often traveled outside the area to sell his merchandise. The next day, after 10:30 a.m., Anto pretended to say goodbye to his wife to leave. But when he left the front door of the house, Anto quietly sneaked toward the back of the house, and he entered from the back door of the house and climbed onto the ceiling of the house without being noticed by Ika, his wife. Anto hid on the ceiling of the house in the hope that he could catch his wife cheating on him. Although his body was tired, Anto persistently waited for about 2 hours on the ceiling, and finally Anto's wait paid off. After 2 hours of waiting, Anto saw Ika, who had left the house, re-enter the house alone. But a few minutes later, a man who was none other than Cartolo was also seen entering their rented house. At that time in the living room, Ika and Cartolo, her affair, immediately made out and kissed, which was witnessed directly by Anto from the ceiling. At that moment, Anto became more and more angry. He became emotional, but he continued to try to restrain himself and continued to watch Ika and Cartolo's movements. Then after making out in the living room, Ika and Cartolo went to the bedroom and locked the door, and in the room, Ika and Cartolo immediately took off their clothes and then had sex, which was also witnessed directly by Anto. This time, Anto could not contain his anger anymore. He felt that he had witnessed enough of the depraved behavior of the two cheating couples, and then he went down to the living room. Anto immediately rushed to the kitchen to get a sharp weapon in the form of a knife that is usually used to cut meat. Then he ran to the room and broke the door. However, there was an action of breaking and holding the bedroom door between Anto and Cartolo. However, because the bedroom door was only made of plywood, the door could not survive and was eventually damaged by Anto's violent breaking. When he managed to get into the room at 12:20 p.m., Anto immediately attacked Cartolo with a butcher's knife that he obtained from the kitchen, which left Cartolo injured on his back. Suddenly, after being injured, Cartolo immediately ran through the window without wearing clothes, trying to get out of the house to save himself. After Cartolo ran away, Anto, who was very upset and angry, also attacked Ika, his wife, with the same weapon, causing Ika to suffer 5 wounds on her body and withstand the pain. Ika had time to run to the front yard of the house to ask for help from neighbors. However, Ika fainted right in front of the door because she lost a lot of blood. The neighbors who heard Ika's scream immediately went to the scene to see what had happened. Upon arrival, they were surprised to see Ika lying on the ground covered in blood. One of the neighbors took the initiative to call an ambulance to help Ika. After the medical team arrived, Ika was immediately taken to the nearest hospital for treatment, and on the other hand, Cartolo, who also received stab wounds, was taken by his family to the same hospital as Ika. Luckily, both Ika and Cartolo survived. Their condition slowly improved after being given 4 bags of blood transfusions. Meanwhile, a local resident reported Ika's condition to the local government. Meanwhile, after attacking his wife and his wife's mistress with a knife, Anto did not run away. He even took responsibility for his actions by immediately surrendering himself to the local police. During police interrogation, Anto admitted that he had slashed his wife, Ika, and his wife's affair partner, Cartolo, who is Ika's cousin. He admitted that he was upset and angry when he caught his wife, Ika, having sex with Cartolo in the room of their rented house. Although Anto's actions were arguably wrong and sadistic, Anto felt satisfied to have rewarded his wife, Ika, in his wife's affair. Anto also did not expect that Cartolo, his wife's cousin who was also his friend, would have the heart to have a dirty relationship with his wife. Apart from being angry, Anto is certainly embarrassed by this fact. The local police, Captain Nursan, finally confirmed that there had indeed been a case of mistreatment of 2 people as a result of the affair. Finally, Anto had to take responsibility for his actions, where he was charged with Article 354.2 of the criminal offense on serious maltreatment, resulting in serious injury with a maximum sentence of 8 years in prison.
Bener-bener tahu di HP ya, waktu dia mau mandi, HP itu diletakkan, pas kebetulan ada cat masuk gitu kan, saya lihati di situ, ya sayang-sayangan ya, ngomong dia hamil segala gitu kan.